This is ridiculous. I have places to be.
The parking citation.
A parking ticket? You dragged me down here for $45? Do you know who you're talking to?
Lower your voice.
This is a joke.
She walked into that courtroom like she owned it. Designer heels clicking on marble floors, head high, sunglasses still on indoors. She looked at the judge the way most people look at a fast food worker, like he was beneath her. She had money, she had connections, she had a lawyer on speed dial, and a mouth that never stopped moving. What she didn't have was common sense, because on this particular Tuesday morning, every single word that came out of her mouth dug her deeper into a hole she could not climb out of. And by the time the bailiff walked over, snapping cold metal around her wrists, the entire courtroom had gone completely silent. Nobody helped her. Nobody was surprised. This is the story of Karen Whitfield, a woman so blinded by privilege that she literally argued herself straight into handcuffs. And every step of this story will leave your jaw on the floor. Before we dive deeper into this absolutely shocking story, hit that subscribe button if you believe in holding authority figures accountable when they abuse their power. Karen Whitfield was not born evil. She was born rich, which sometimes amounts to the same thing when nobody ever tells you no. Growing up in Maplewood, she had everything handed to her: private schools, vacations abroad, a credit card at 16. By her 30s, she ran a small interior design business, drove a white Range Rover, and treated every public space like her personal living room. She was the woman at the grocery store who parked in 2 spots, the one who sent food back 3 times at restaurants, the one who called managers for sport, not necessity. Her neighbors knew her. Her HOA feared her. Local shop owners cringed when they saw her car pull up. But nobody had ever truly stopped Karen Whitfield, not once in 41 years. That was about to change on a quiet Tuesday morning in the Maplewood Municipal Courthouse. But what brought Karen to that courthouse in the first place, and why was she already furious before she even walked through the door? It started with a $45 parking ticket. Karen had parked her Range Rover in a disabled parking space outside a salon. No permit, no placard, just Karen deciding the space was convenient and that her schedule was more important than the law. Officer Darius Cole, a 10-year veteran and father of 2, placed the ticket on her windshield at 11:14 a.m. By 11:16, Karen was standing in front of him, ticket in hand, voice already raised. "Do you know who I am?" she said. Officer Cole had heard that question before. He smiled politely and explained that the fine was non-negotiable and she could contest it in court if she disagreed. Karen did not say thank you. Karen said, "I'll have your badge." Officer Cole wrote that exchange down in his notes, every single word, because in 10 years on the force, he had learned one thing: people like Karen always escalated, and when they did, documentation was everything. What Karen didn't know was that Officer Cole had already pressed record on his body camera. What was on that footage would change everything. The body camera footage was clear, crisp, and absolutely damning. Not damning for Officer Cole, damning for Karen, because while she remembered the encounter as him being rude and dismissive, the footage showed something completely different. It showed Karen poking her finger 2 inches from Officer Cole's face. It showed her calling him a glorified meter maid. It showed her threatening to make one phone call and end his career by Friday. Officer Cole never raised his voice, not once. He stood straight, spoke professionally, and simply told her to have a good day. Karen snatched the ticket, got in her car, and screeched out of the parking lot. She filed a formal complaint against Officer Cole that same afternoon, claiming he had been aggressive and threatening toward her. She described the encounter as traumatic and said she felt unsafe. The department pulled the body cam footage. They watched it, and then they watched it again. What happened next inside that police department is something Karen never saw coming, and it set the stage for a courtroom showdown that nobody would forget. When Internal Affairs reviewed the footage, the complaint against Officer Cole was dismissed within 24 hours. Not just dismissed, it was flagged, because filing a false complaint against a police officer is not just embarrassing. In Maplewood, it is a misdemeanor. The department contacted Karen's attorney with a simple message to withdraw the complaint or face consequences. Karen's response? She doubled down. She told her attorney she didn't care, that she had friends on the city council, and that she planned to show up in court personally to straighten this out. Her attorney advised strongly against it. Karen fired him and hired someone cheaper who told her what she wanted to hear. She waltzed into the courthouse on Tuesday morning, representing herself, armed with nothing but arrogance and a statement she had written on perfume stationery. Officer Cole arrived with his body cam footage, his supervisor, and a very patient smile. The moment Judge Harold Tate walked into that courtroom and saw Karen's expression, he already knew this was going to be a long morning. But even he had no idea what was coming. Judge Harold Tate had been on the bench for 22 years. He had seen crying criminals, laughing lawyers, and everything in between. He was known for three things: patience, fairness, and absolute zero tolerance in his courtroom. His rules were simple and posted clearly on the wall: no phones, no outbursts, address the court properly, and remove sunglasses when entering. Karen walked in with her sunglasses on. The bailiff politely asked her to remove them. Karen said, "They're prescription." They were not prescription, they were Gucci. Judge Tate looked up from his papers and asked her calmly once to remove the glasses and take her seat. Karen removed the glasses slowly with maximum attitude and sat down like she was doing the courtroom a favor. The gallery watched. Several people exchanged glances. This woman had entered a lion's den wearing a steak necklace. And every step of this story will leave your jaw on the floor. When Judge Tate called Karen Whitfield's case, she stood up and said 5 words that silenced the room. "I don't recognize this court's authority." She had read something online, a legal theory popular in fringe circles, suggested citizens could declare themselves exempt from municipal jurisdiction. It was not real law. It was not recognized by any court in the country, but Karen had read 3 articles about it and decided it was her golden ticket. Judge Tate removed his glasses and looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Whitfield," he said, "this court recognizes you just fine. Please be seated and we'll proceed." Karen was not done. She launched into a 4-minute speech about sovereign rights, personal liberty, and what she called the unlawful ticketing of private citizens. Officer Cole stared at the ceiling. The court reporter typed without looking up. 2 people in the gallery quietly pulled out their phones before remembering they weren't allowed. The judge let her finish every word, and then he said something so calm, so precise, that it stopped Karen, cold, but only for a moment. Judge Tate asked the prosecution to play the body cam footage. The screen flickered on. The courtroom watched in silence. They saw Karen park illegally. They saw Officer Cole approach professionally and calmly. They saw Karen's finger 2 inches from Officer Cole's face. They heard her threaten his career. They watched her storm away. 68 seconds of footage. It felt like a full documentary. When the screen went dark, Judge Tate turned to Karen and asked her if she wished to respond. Karen said the footage was edited and taken out of context. An audible sound came from the gallery, not quite a laugh, something caught between disbelief and amusement. Judge Tate asked her what context would make threatening an officer's career acceptable. Karen said, "He was disrespecting me first." The judge asked how. Karen said, "By giving me a ticket." The judge wrote something down. What he wrote in that moment would directly determine what happened to Karen by the end of the hearing, and it wasn't in her favor. The prosecution then introduced the formal complaint Karen had filed, the one claiming Officer Cole was aggressive and threatening. They placed it side by side with the body cam footage. The contrast was so stark it was almost embarrassing. Judge Tate read the complaint aloud. Every embellishment, every false claim. Karen had described Officer Cole as screaming at her. The footage showed him speaking at a calm, measured tone. She described him as physically intimidating. He had stood 4 feet away with his hands at his sides the entire time. Karen's face was unreadable, but her jaw was tight. The prosecution noted that filing a false police complaint was a misdemeanor and that the department had extended Karen the courtesy of withdrawing the complaint before today's hearing. Judge Tate looked at her. "Miss Whitfield, were you given that opportunity?" Karen said, "My previous attorney was incompetent." The judge's expression didn't change, but something shifted in the room because what Karen had just said. With every question the judge asked, Karen's composure cracked a little more. She called Officer Cole a power-hungry nobody. She called the original find extortion by uniform. She told the court reporter to slow down because this is important. She asked the bailiff if he was even paying attention. Each time, Judge Tate gave her a warning. First warning, professional language, please. The second warning addresses the court, not individuals. Third warning, one more outburst and there will be consequences. Karen received all 3 warnings in under 9 minutes, a personal record for Judge Tate's courtroom, the clerk would later say. But the 4th moment, the one that crossed every line, came when Karen looked directly at Judge Tate and told him he was clearly biased and that she would be speaking to his superiors after this circus. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Tate set down his pen, and in 22 years on the bench, what he said next was something he had said only 3 times before, and every single time it ended the same way. "Ms. Whitfield, I am holding you in contempt of court." The room exhaled. Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" Judge Tate explained clearly contempt of court meant she had shown deliberate disrespect and defiance of the court's authority. It carried a fine and, in repeated cases, potential jail time. Karen laughed, an actual laugh. "You cannot be serious," she said. "Over a parking ticket?" "Over your conduct," Judge Tate corrected. Karen then made the single worst decision of the entire morning. She picked up her designer bag, slung it over her shoulder, and said, "I'm leaving. This is a waste of my time." She took 2 steps toward the exit. The bailiff stepped forward. What happened in the next 10 seconds was so fast, so final, that even the most seasoned observers in that gallery said they'd never seen anything escalate that quickly or that completely. Walking out on an active court proceeding is not just rude, it is illegal. The bailiff placed a firm hand on Karen's arm and informed her she was not free to leave. Karen yanked her arm back. "Do not touch me." Judge Tate spoke clearly from the bench. "Miss Whitfield, sit down immediately or you will be arrested." Karen turned to face the judge from across the room and said, and this part was captured on the court's own recording, "Arrest me? For what? For standing up to a corrupt little man in a cheap robe?" The gallery had gone completely, utterly silent. Officer Cole, seated at the prosecution table, stared straight ahead. He would later say in an interview that he felt genuinely sorry for her at that moment, not because she didn't deserve consequences, but because she clearly had no idea how deep a hole she was digging. Because what Karen still didn't know, what nobody had told her yet, was that this hearing was no longer just about a parking ticket. Judge Tate calmly addressed the court. The original matter, a $45 parking fine, had now been joined by a contempt of court charge, potential misdemeanor charges for filing a false police complaint, and now attempting to leave an active court proceeding. The prosecutor, who had barely spoken all morning, quietly added a note to his file. Karen stood in the middle of the room, bag on her shoulder, sunglasses back on, she had put them back on, nobody knew when, and stared at the judge with an expression that mixed fury with the first faint trace of fear. "You can't stack charges on me like this. This is harassment." "This," said Judge Tate, "is consequence." He nodded once to the bailiff, and that nod, that single quiet nod, was the moment everything changed, the moment the morning stopped being a hearing and became something Karen would never, ever forget. The bailiff approached Karen with handcuffs, not as a threat, not as a warning, as an action. Karen stepped back. "You are not putting those on me." The bailiff said calmly and professionally that she was being detained by order of the court for contempt and failure to comply. Karen looked around the gallery for support, for one ally, for anyone. Nobody moved. The woman who had spent 41 years making other people feel small stood in the middle of a courtroom, designer bag sliding off her shoulder, and felt something she had never felt before. Small. The handcuffs clicked into place. Karen Whitfield, interior designer, HOA terror, destroyer of service workers, was escorted to a holding area of the Maplewood courthouse, still wearing her Gucci sunglasses. A woman in the gallery whispered to her husband, "She walked in here like a queen, and she's leaving like this." But the story was far from over, because what happened when Karen's phone was taken away and she was left alone in that holding room, that's when the real breaking point came. The holding room was small, beige, and had no windows. No phone, no audience, no one to perform for. Karen sat with her hands in her lap and stared at the wall. For the first time all morning, she was quiet. The court-appointed check-in officer asked if she needed water. Karen said nothing for a moment, then said yes, then said thank you genuinely, softly, in a voice that sounded nothing like the woman from the courtroom. The officer noted it in her log, not with judgment, just as a fact. In that room, stripped of every prop and every audience, Karen Whitfield looked exactly like what she was, a frightened, middle-aged woman who had pushed too far and was only now beginning to understand the weight of it. A $45 parking ticket had become a criminal record moment, and for the first time she wasn't angry about it. She was ashamed. But shame, as Karen was about to discover, does not erase consequences, and what was waiting for her when she returned to that courtroom would test whether her change of heart was real or just another performance. When Karen was brought back before Judge Tate an hour later, something unexpected happened. Officer Darius Cole asked to address the court. He stood, straightened his uniform, and spoke directly and calmly. He said he did not want Karen jailed. He said he had seen the way the holding room changed people sometimes, and he hoped this had been one of those moments. He said he had taken this job to protect people, including people who didn't treat him with respect. He asked the judge to consider leniency, provided Karen acknowledged what she had done. The gallery was stunned. Karen, seated at the defendant's table, stared at Officer Cole with an expression nobody quite named. It wasn't gratitude yet. It wasn't relief. It was something raw, the look of someone who had expected an enemy and found a human being instead. Judge Tate looked at Karen, and what he asked her at that moment was the question the entire room had been waiting for, the question that would determine whether Karen Whitfield left that courthouse changed or unchanged. Judge Tate asked Karen if she had anything she wanted to say. Karen stood slowly. No bag, no sunglasses, no performance. She said she was sorry. Not to the room, not to the camera. She looked directly at Officer Cole and said she was sorry. She said she had spent so long believing rules didn't apply to her that she had forgotten rules existed to protect everyone, including her. She said the parking ticket was valid. She said the complaint was false, and she knew it when she filed it. She said she had treated Officer Cole like he was nothing, and he had shown her grace more than she deserved. The apology lasted less than 2 minutes. It was the most honest 2 minutes Karen Whitfield had experienced in years. Officer Cole nodded once. Simple, dignified. Judge Tate made a note. But an apology, however genuine, doesn't make charges disappear. What Judge Tate decided next would either give Karen a second chance or seal her fate permanently.
Judge Tate found Karen guilty of contempt of court and issued a $1,000 fine suspended pending 6 months of good behavior. The false complaint charge was referred to the DA's office, not dropped but noted with Karen's apology on record and Officer Cole's request for leniency attached. The original parking fine stood $45 plus $200 in late fees. Karen was required to complete a civic responsibility course, a program typically assigned to first-time offenders, and to write a formal letter of apology to Officer Cole through the department. She was not jailed, she was not publicly destroyed, she was held accountable, firmly, fairly, with the exact amount of consequence her actions earned. Judge Tate looked at her before dismissing the case and said, "Ms. Whitfield, I hope today taught you something that nobody in your life has taught you before. Every person in this room deserves respect. That includes the people who ticket your car." Karen nodded, but what she did in the weeks after walking out of that courthouse, that's what separates this story from every other entitled Karen story you've ever heard. Karen paid the fine the same day. She completed the civic course in 3 weeks, the minimum time allowed. She wrote the letter to Officer Cole, not a short letter, 4 pages handwritten, in which she described her upbringing, her patterns, and what that Tuesday morning had cracked open in her. Officer Cole read it at home at his kitchen table while his daughters did homework nearby. He said in a later interview that the letter was one of the most honest things he had ever received from a stranger. Karen's business began requiring her to treat suppliers, contractors, and assistants differently. Former employees who had quit because of her behavior began hearing from colleagues that she had changed, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. She did not become a saint. She did not launch a redemption tour. She just became a person who finally understood that the world was not her personal stage. But there is one final twist to this story, something that happened 6 months later that brought Karen and Officer Cole face to face one more time. And what transpired in that moment is the part of the story that nobody saw coming. 6 months after that Tuesday morning, Karen Whitfield walked into the
Maplewood Police Department's annual Community Appreciation event. She wasn't invited. She came anyway. She brought 2 trays of food from a local restaurant, set them on the table without announcing herself, and started to leave. Officer Cole saw her from across the room. He walked over. They stood facing each other, the officer who had stayed calm when she was in a storm, and the woman who had needed a courthouse and a pair of handcuffs to finally hear what everyone around her had been saying for years. Officer Cole extended his hand. Karen shook it. No cameras, no audience, no performance. Just 2 people in a community center choosing to move forward. Judge Tate, when told about the moment later, simply said, "That's what this system is supposed to do, not crush people, correct them." Karen Whitfield never parked in a disabled space again. She also left a 5-star review for Officer Cole on the department's public feedback page. The review simply said, "He was right. I was wrong. Thank you." If this story moved you or made you believe in accountability with humanity, share it. Subscribe to Rollins Justice for more real stories where justice is done right. Drop a comment below. Did Karen deserve a second chance, or was the judge too lenient? Let's talk.